My wife humiliated me at her office party, calling me weak and unadventurous. But when I walked away with the CEO's respect, I found a new career and my own strength. Hey there. Welcome to today's story. What's going on in your life right now? Are you ready to hear a story that's going to make you think? Because today, we're diving into the life of someone who had it all until they didn't. The main character of this story was stuck in the shadows of someone else's ambition, always second to their partner's success, never fully realizing their own potential. Can you relate to feeling invisible, like you're just playing a supporting role in your own life? Well, this person made a choice. They chose themselves, walked away, and started over. Stick with me through the story to find out how they reclaimed their life, built something for themselves, and what it really means to choose your own happiness. By the way, if you enjoy this story, I'd really appreciate your support in helping me reach 1,000 subscribers. It'll keep me motivated to bring you more amazing stories. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, I'm Jake, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the guy in the background. Not that I minded at first. In fact, I kinda liked it. I had a solid job working in IT support, boring, but stable. No one expected much from me. But there was this one thing I never talked about, not even to my friends or family. I used to have big dreams. Like really big dreams. I wasn't always this guy who fixed printers and worked behind a desk all day. Back in college, I was on track to become an architect. I had real talent too, at least that's what my professors said. I was drawing up blueprints for my future. But then, life happened. Bills, family stuff, and of course, love. That's when I met Hannah. Hannah was everything I wasn't. She was ambitious, driven, and always had a plan. While I was trying to get by with a temporary job to pay the rent, she landed a marketing position at one of the top firms in the city. It was a big deal. And me? Well, I was just trying to survive. We were a team, I thought. She'd tell me, once I get promoted, we can finally focus on your career. But promotions came, and my career was always on the back burner. We lived in a stylish apartment, one of those places you see in magazines, minimalist, sleek, filled with furniture I'd never pick out. I had my gaming setup tucked away in the corner of the spare room, which we called the office, though she rarely used it. My sketches from college? Out the door. Replaced with generic abstract art from some overpriced store downtown. She always told me it didn't fit the vibe of our place. But you know what? I kept telling myself it didn't matter. I was supporting her, and that was enough. I thought things would eventually change. After all, I was doing everything she asked. Then came that night. The night everything changed. The party was one of those corporate events that always felt like a scene out of a movie. Elegance oozed from every corner, crystal chandeliers hung above, their light bouncing off polished floors and sparkling glasses. The hum of chatter blended with the clink of champagne flutes and the clattering of silverware on fine china. Everyone was dressed to the nines, in tailored suits and designer dresses, their laughter perfectly timed, their smiles bright and flawless. And then there was me. I wasn't excited to be here. Hell, I wasn't even sure I belonged here. But this wasn't about me. It was about Hannah. She'd just been promoted to Director of Client Relations. This was her moment. And I was supposed to be the supportive husband, standing in the background, nodding along, and pretending like I fit in. But I didn't fit in. I hadn't even dressed properly. Not because I didn't care, but because I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. Hannah had already been coaching me all day, giving me instructions like I was a character in some poorly written play. Remember to mention your project management certifications if anyone asks, she told me, her voice sharp, almost like a drill sergeant. And please, try to be more confident this time. Last time, you just stood there like a statue. I tried to laugh it off, but the sting was real. I hated the way she looked at me sometimes. Like I was a problem that needed fixing. Like everything about me needed to be upgraded to meet her standards. Inside, I felt the creeping sense of inadequacy gnawing at me, the growing anxiety that had become my constant companion over the years. She didn't even seem to notice it. We arrived at the venue. And from the moment I stepped inside, I could feel my heart sinking. The place was a glass-walled fortress of perfection, so pristine it almost made me want to turn around and run the other way. People moved in slow motion, flawless in their expensive suits and confident smiles. They spoke in quiet voices, as if they were all sharing some private joke that I wasn't invited to. And there was Hannah glowing in the spotlight. She was at home here, a queen in her realm, while I felt like a fish out of water, gasping for air in a place where I had no place. She, however, didn't notice. She never did. With an almost forceful grip on my arm, she pulled me through the crowd, her fingers digging into my skin as if she was trying to physically drag me into her world. Whether I was ready or not, I had never felt more invisible in my life, standing beside her as she flitted between her colleagues like they were all old friends. It was like I wasn't even there, just a prop to help her look better. Smile, nod, look interested, make small talk. I had done this dance before, but tonight it was different. My discomfort was palpable. The air felt thick with the weight of everyone's expectations, and I felt more out of place than ever before. And then, like clockwork, Hannah's boss, Lucas, appeared. He was followed closely by Graham, the CEO of the company. Lucas, a man who oozed confidence from every pore, didn't even greet me directly. Instead, he focused his attention on Hannah, laughing about some inside joke I wasn't part of. But it was Graham who turned to me with that patented CEO smile, the one that felt more like a test than a greeting. "So, Jake?" he asked. His voice smooth and polished, like everything about him was perfectly calculated. "How do you and Hannah manage to make such a great team? You're both so dynamic." The word dynamic hit me like a ton of bricks. Dynamic? Was that really how he saw us? Hannah, radiant and brilliant in her leadership role, and me what? The silent, obedient sidekick? The one who didn't belong in this high-flying world of corporate success. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, I felt a familiar pressure. Hannah jumped in as she always did. "Jake?" She laughed, her voice saccharine sweet, too perfect to be real. "Oh, he's great at supporting me. He's always behind the scenes, keeping everything running smoothly. I'm the one who pushes boundaries, though. He's more of the steady, reliable type." The words hit me like daggers. I wasn't just standing in her shadow. I was practically invisible. I was the supportive husband, the one who wasn't supposed to have ambitions or a voice of his own. And I couldn't even argue. It was true, wasn't it? For years, I'd been that guy, quietly stepping aside to let her shine. But hearing it out loud in front of her colleagues, in front of them, it stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. I forced a smile, hoping it looked real. But I could feel my face tightening, the heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck. But it didn't stop there. Hannah kept going, listing off every single thing I was afraid to do. Every moment where I had felt less than perfect. "Remember when we went rock climbing?" she said, turning to the group. Jake couldn't even get past the first few steps. I had to finish the climb for both of us. The laughter that followed felt like it came from another world. It was like I wasn't even there, just an object. An afterthought to everyone else in the room. Her words hung in the air, suffocating me. I tried to smile, to laugh it off like she wanted, but my chest felt tight, my throat closing up. "And camping," she added, her voice ringing with that fake cheer. "He won't sleep unless there's a full bathroom set up nearby. Not exactly the rugged outdoorsman, right?" The group erupted into laughter again. And I felt my heart sink. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, the weight of the humiliation too much to bear. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like this. But tonight, it felt worse. It felt like the culmination of years of small comments, tiny jabs that chipped away at me until there was nothing left but a hollow shell standing in front of her. Smiling like everything was fine. She had always done this. Undermining me, making me feel small, invisible. But tonight, it felt like she had stripped me bare in front of the very people I didn't belong with. And I couldn't pretend anymore. The laughter continued, but it felt like I was drowning in it. I could hear them, but it was like they were a million miles away. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for making me feel so worthless, but I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed by the need to keep up appearances. Finally, I excused myself, my voice barely audible as I muttered something about needing some fresh air. I pushed my way through the crowd, my heart pounding, my face flushed with embarrassment. The night air outside was cool, but it did nothing to calm the fire raging inside me. I leaned against the railing, staring at the city lights below, feeling like I was suffocating. The laughter from the party still echoed in my ears, the words from Hannah replaying over and over again in my mind. I had been her husband, her partner, her support system, but in that moment, I felt more like a joke. I wasn't the man she had promised to support. I was the man she had reduced to nothing. I had sacrificed everything for her career, for her success, and this is how she repaid me. By making me the punchline. And as I stood there, I realized something. Something I should have realized a long time ago. I had been invisible for too long. I had let her define who I was, and I had let myself be defined by her. But no more. Tonight, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just going to stand by while she continued to humiliate me. I wasn't going to let her dictate my life anymore. It was time for me to stop being the steady, behind-the-scenes guy. It was time to step out of the shadows and find my own light. I stood out there on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my face, trying to steady myself. Below, the city sprawled out in a sea of lights, each one representing a world that felt so far from mine, shimmering and alive with possibility. But in that moment, it all felt irrelevant. The noise, the glitter, the perfectly polished lives of everyone inside that party, it didn't matter. It wasn't my world. I didn't belong there. And more importantly, I didn't belong in the life I'd been living for so long. I hadn't even realized how suffocating it had all become until now. The years of quiet submission, always in the background, never really me. Always her, the ambitious, driven, successful Hannah. I had spent so much time trying to be the perfect supporting husband, trying to live up to her expectations, her plans, her career. And it had worked, at least for a while. I convinced myself that if I just kept quiet, if I kept supporting her dreams, mine would eventually come true. I had convinced myself that being the man behind the woman was enough. But it wasn't. The moment I stepped outside, the city's cold air reminded me that I hadn't been alive in a long time. I had been drifting. As I stood there, grappling with the weight of it all, I felt a presence beside me. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Lucas had come out to join me. He didn't say much at first, just stood beside me, offering me a drink. I took it more out of habit than desire. After a moment of silence, he spoke, his voice calm yet heavy with experience. "I've been where you are," he said quietly. "You know, being the butt of the joke." His words hit me harder than anything else had. There was something in the way he said it, so simple, but with a quiet understanding. He wasn't pitying me. No, there was no condescension in his tone. He wasn't looking down at me or making excuses for me. It was as if he was speaking to me as an equal. And for some reason, that moment felt like a breakthrough. I felt seen for the first time in ages. I swallowed, not knowing how to respond. I wasn't used to this. Hannah had always been the center of attention, always the one who commanded the room, and I had been fine with that, or so I thought. But now, standing here with Lucas, I realized how wrong I'd been to accept the role I'd carved out for myself. How long had I been living in the shadows of her success, quietly pushing my own dreams aside in the name of support? "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice low, more vulnerable than I had ever allowed it to be. The words felt strange, but also relieving. Like I was finally acknowledging something I'd kept buried for years. Lucas gave me a small, almost knowing smile. "That's the thing," he said, turning to face me more directly. "You don't have to know exactly what to do right now. You just have to stop being afraid of doing something for you. I know it's not easy. I've been there." And then it clicked. It wasn't about knowing the next step or having the perfect plan. It was about taking the step. I had spent so many years letting Hannah's ambition, her success, her drive define who I was, that I had forgotten what it felt like to want something for myself. You've been living in her shadow, man. You've convinced yourself that your only role is to be there for her. And for a while, you believed it was enough. But it's not, Lucas continued, his tone a bit firmer now, as if he were giving me permission to let go of something that had been holding me back. You have dreams too, Jake, and it's time you put them first. His words felt like a punch to the gut, sharp, real, and undeniable. I had spent years burying my own desires, my own career goals, convinced that her success was all that mattered. But as the fog lifted, I realized how much I had neglected myself. My own dreams, my own aspirations, they had been tucked away, abandoned in favor of her journey. I had fallen into the trap of thinking that if I just kept supporting her, eventually we'd both win. But that was a lie I had been telling myself. "I've put everything on hold for her," I said, more to myself than to Lucas. "I've been waiting for the right moment, for the right time when it would be my turn. But it never came. It was always her turn. Always." Lucas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a long sip of his drink, watching me carefully. "It doesn't work like that, man. You can't keep waiting for permission to live your life. That's not how life works." It was like a switch flipped in my brain. I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep making excuses for why my dreams didn't matter as much as hers. I had been waiting for years, for her to give me space, for the right moment to reclaim my life. But all I was doing was watching my own life slip away, quietly sacrificing my own identity for someone else's success. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't just need a break from the party. I needed a break from the entire life I had been living. I looked at Lucas, who gave me a small nod of approval, as if he understood exactly what I was thinking. "It's time, man," he said, almost like a confirmation, as if he had seen this before. "It's time to do something for you." The words rang in my ears. "It's time to do something for you." I stood there for a moment, the weight of those words sinking in. And then, without another word, I turned and walked back toward the entrance. It wasn't just about walking away from the party, it was about walking away from the version of myself that had been holding me back. I walked through the crowd, my chest tight, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear Hannah's voice somewhere behind me, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I had spent so many years looking back, trying to make everyone else proud, trying to fit into a life that wasn't really mine. But not anymore. I wasn't walking away from her, I was walking toward myself, toward the man I had buried for far too long. The man with dreams, with goals, with passions that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. When I reached the door, I paused for a second, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay in that place any longer. And with that, I stepped out into the night, leaving the world I had been living in behind. I wasn't the background character anymore. I was finally taking control of my own story. The next few days were a blur. I spent them sifting through boxes, piles of forgotten notebooks, and old sketch pads, the remnants of a past I had abandoned for far too long. There they were, blueprints, floor plans, architectural ideas that had once been my world. My hands trembled as I turned the yellowed pages, each one filled with the passion I had once poured into my work. Ideas that had been discarded like the leftover scraps of someone else's dream. I'd almost forgotten how much I loved designing, how much it meant to me. Looking at the sketches, I could see the person I used to be. The Jake who wasn't just the supportive husband. The Jake who had once believed in something bigger than himself, his dreams, his passions, his purpose. But now, I was looking at a stranger. Someone who had allowed years to slip by without living for himself, without pursuing what he truly wanted. I was looking at the ghost of a life I had abandoned, and suddenly, the weight of it all hit me. How had I allowed myself to forget what it felt like to be alive with purpose? There was a rawness in this realization. It wasn't just the projects I had abandoned, it was my entire sense of self. How much of me had been buried in the pursuit of something that wasn't even mine? How much of my own identity had I suppressed in the name of supporting Hannah's success? I stood there in the dim light of my apartment, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something monumental. Something that could either pull me back into the darkness I had just walked away from or launch me into a future I never thought I could have. I didn't know exactly where to begin, but I knew I had to start somewhere. That was when I called Lucas. It wasn't something I had planned. I didn't even know why I did it. Maybe I was seeking validation, someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for wanting to go back to my roots. Maybe I just needed someone who would understand, someone who had been through something similar. Someone who knew what it was like to stand on the brink of a life-changing decision. He picked up the phone on the first ring. "You good?" he asked, his voice steady, calm, almost like he was expecting my call. "I don't know," I replied honestly, my voice low and uncertain. "I think I'm starting over, Lucas." "I figured," he said with a quiet chuckle. "How about coffee?" And so we met at a small cafe a few days later, tucked away in the corner of the city I hadn't noticed in years. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, just what I needed. Lucas ordered a black coffee, no frills, while I sat across from him with my own cup, swirling the contents absent-mindedly. He didn't rush me to talk, didn't push. He just let me sit there and find my words. "Tell me what's going on," he finally said. I let out a deep breath, the weight of the last few days flooding my mind. I don't know where to begin. I'm not even sure where I'm headed. But I can't keep doing what I've been doing. I've spent years in the shadows, Lucas, letting her dreams consume me while mine just faded. Lucas leaned back in his chair, watching me carefully. His expression was one of understanding, not judgment. I could feel the years of silence between us evaporating as he let me speak freely. I didn't even realize it until now, I continued, but I've been waiting for permission to live my life. Waiting for the right time to do something for me. But that time, it's never going to come. Lucas nodded slowly like he knew exactly what I was talking about. He took a sip of his coffee, thinking for a moment before responding. You're not the first person to get stuck in someone else's narrative, he said. It's easy to get lost, especially when you're supporting someone else's dream. But here's the thing, you can't keep putting your own life on hold for someone else. It doesn't work like that. You have your own story to tell, Jake. It felt like a light bulb had clicked on in my head. For the first time, I saw the truth of it. I had been living as a supporting character in my own life story. I had given up so much of myself for someone else's success that I didn't even know who I was anymore. I wasn't angry at Hannah anymore, at least not in the way I used to be. It wasn't about blaming her, it was about realizing that I had let myself fade into the background. That was the hardest pill to swallow. I had let it happen. I can't just keep existing in the background anymore, I said, more to myself than to Lucas. I need to be more than just Hannah's husband. I need to be Jake. I need to build something for myself. Lucas smiled. You're on the right track, my friend. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into it. The first project I got was small, a consultation for a friend of Lucas who was working on a renovation. It was nothing groundbreaking, nothing huge. But it was a start. It was something that reminded me of who I was before all of this, the designer, the creator, the architect. The person I had forgotten I was. I started sketching again. Not just for clients, but for myself. I found myself drawn to projects I had started years ago, designs I had abandoned because they didn't fit into the life I thought I should be living. I dusted off old blueprints, redrew concepts that had been buried for years. And with each line I drew, I could feel a piece of myself coming back to life. The first few days were rough. I was out of practice, unsure of myself. But with each passing day, I grew more confident. I had forgotten what it was like to feel alive in my work, to see the world in terms of design, of potential, of what could be. Slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. Hannah didn't even notice. She was too busy with her own career, her own success, to care. She still came home late, still talked about her promotions and client meetings like they were the only things that mattered. I realized something as I watched her, sitting there on the couch, going on and on about the latest milestone in her career. I had been so absorbed in her life that I forgot to live my own. And for the first time in years, that was okay. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her to notice my progress. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I was doing something I loved, and that felt more fulfilling than anything I had ever experienced before. I wasn't just Hannah's husband anymore. I was Jake, the architect, the dreamer, the creator. I was rebuilding my life from the ground up, brick by brick, sketch by sketch. There was still so much left to do, so many pieces of myself I had to rediscover. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I had a future that was mine again. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I was living my life my way. As the months passed, the transformation was undeniable. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was living on my terms. The projects came in one after another, each one bigger and more exciting than the last. My name was finally getting out there in the architectural world, and that sense of recognition, of being seen for my skills and my vision, was something I'd forgotten how much I craved. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't experienced in years. I had even enrolled in night classes to finish my architecture degree. It was a strange feeling walking back into a classroom after so many years. The last time I'd been there, I was someone else, someone who had been willing to let his dreams slip away for the sake of someone else's ambitions. Now, as I sat in those lectures, I was reminded of the person I used to be. Passionate, determined, focused on a future that was entirely mine. And as I worked late into the nights, drafting designs and poring over blueprints, I realized I was becoming the person I had always meant to be. But things with Hannah, they weren't easy. The gap between us only seemed to widen as I grew more immersed in my own world. First, she didn't even notice. Or maybe she did, but it didn't matter to her. She was wrapped up in her own whirlwind of corporate success, her promotions, her meetings, and her ever-increasing ambitions. In her eyes, my new path was more of an inconvenience than an achievement. She had always been the star of the show, and now she saw herself as the only one deserving of the spotlight. When she did finally notice my career taking off, she didn't react the way I'd hoped. Instead of sharing in my excitement, she tried to turn my success into a problem. She accused me of becoming too focused on my work, of not being present for her, of abandoning her in pursuit of my own dreams. "You're being selfish, Jake," she said one night, her voice trembling with frustration. "You're leaving me behind, chasing your own success like it matters more than anything else." But what hurt the most was how she framed it. She didn't understand, and she couldn't. For her, I had always been the steady partner, the one who took care of things in the background while she soared ahead. I was the support, the foundation on which her dreams were built. But now that I was building my own, she saw it as betrayal. It wasn't that I didn't care about her, but I had spent years living for someone else. It was time to start living for me. It was in those moments of accusation, when she made me feel guilty for pursuing my own dreams, that I truly realized how far we had drifted. She was trying to hold me back, to keep me in a box that had been molded around her needs, her expectations. But I wasn't that person anymore, and I couldn't go back. One night, after a particularly heated argument, she broke down. Her walls crumbled, and she begged me to help her fix things. She promised she'd support my career now, that we could make it work, that we could find a way to balance our dreams. But I wasn't interested. Not anymore. For so long, I had been the one trying to make it work for her. I had swallowed my own aspirations to be her partner, her rock, her support. But I had forgotten what it felt like to have dreams that were mine alone. I had neglected them, buried them in the name of sacrifice and compromise. But in that moment, I felt that it wasn't about fixing anything for her anymore. It was about fixing myself. "I can't keep doing this, Hannah," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos of emotions swirling inside. "I've spent so long supporting you, living for you, but I can't do it anymore. I need to live for myself." She didn't understand. She couldn't. Her tears were a mix of confusion and desperation, but I couldn't let that change my mind. She was still stuck in the narrative where her success came first. But I had rewritten my story. I packed my things and left. It wasn't just about the office party or the constant belittling. It wasn't even just about the way she had made me feel small for years. It was about something much deeper. It was about finally taking control of my life. About making the conscious decision to stop putting her and her career above my own happiness. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her validation. I had everything I needed to succeed, and that success wasn't just in my career. It was in reclaiming my own identity, my own potential. It's been months now. In that time, I've become a full consultant, working on several high-profile projects. Projects that challenge me, excite me, and make me proud of the work I'm doing. I've built relationships with clients who see me for what I truly am, an architect, not just a supportive husband. I feel like I'm becoming the man I was always meant to be. I'm no longer living in the shadow of someone else's success. I'm standing tall in my own light. And as for Hannah, well, her career imploded after the company found out about the data manipulation she'd been doing. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. The same drive that had propelled her to the top came crashing down as her reputation was shattered. She tried to reach out to me, begged me to come back to help her pick up the pieces. But I didn't respond. At first, I struggled with the guilt. Part of me wondered if I was being cold or cruel. But then I realized the greatest revenge wasn't watching her fail. It wasn't even about her downfall at all. The greatest revenge was reclaiming my own life, my own potential. It was about not allowing myself to stay small. Not allowing myself to be silenced or buried under someone else's dreams. I had spent so many years apologizing for who I was, for what I wanted, for what I deserved. But no more. Now I stood tall, not because of anyone else's approval, but because of my own. In the end, my success wasn't defined by her failure. It wasn't defined by anyone but me. I didn't need her to validate my existence anymore. I had learned to live for myself, to pursue my own dreams, to stand on my own. And that was all the validation I would ever need. Sometimes it takes walking away from everything you thought you wanted to find out what you really need. And trust me, it's never too late to start over. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to drop a comment and share your own feelings or feedback. Your insights mean a lot. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. There's more coming your way, and I can't wait to share it with you. Thanks for sticking with me and listening till the very end. See you next time.